It's another wild day in the world of Magic the Gathering. Wizards of the Coast has just revealed a brand new batch of Lord of the Rings cards. Some of them are amazing, some of them are awful. And on top of that, they've got a crazy new plan for serialized Lord of the Rings cards as well.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for another glorious installment of Mega Magic News. We are going full on with Lord of the Rings. Do you remember the scene boxes that recently got spoiled where out of nowhere we had like more than a dozen new cards to talk about because it was either Walmart or Target messed up and we're like, hey, we put the stuff out on the shelf way in advance. Oops. Well, now we've finally gotten the spoilers for the missing box set. So there are 6 cards from the special Gandalf battle scene. Some of them are mind-blowing. You just read and go, this is crazy good. And some of them you read and you go, this is terrible. Like genuinely, why did they even put this in here? On top of that, we're getting some super special serialized cards, right? They've got to try and do something now after the hype of the One Ring chase. So they're doing something different with the Bakshi Secret Lair collector packs, and we're going to take a look at that too. Now, quickly, before we go and look at the cards, I want to talk about other Magic cards. If you like Magic gameplay action, I have been playing Chandelure, the old school Magic game, right? And you can see that gameplay over on my live stream archive channel. I'll leave a link at the end of this video. And this playthrough is the most salty playthrough I've ever had. So if you like to watch people rage out about Magic, you got some of that. And if you like people cheering about Magic, got some of that too. That out of the way, let's take a look at the Lord of the Rings Insanity. The first card we're going to look at today is Absolute Insanity. Courageous Resolve. 1 white and 2 for an instant that says up to 1 target creature you control gains protection from each of your opponents until end of turn. Draw a card. And then it goes on to explain what that protection means. Can't be blocked, targeted, dealt damage, enchanted, or equipped by anything controlled by those players. Protection is a very potent effect. And that's not all this card does. You could technically play this if you have no creatures out just to take advantage of the second half of the card, which uses Fateful Hour. Fateful Hour requires that you have 5 or less life, but if you do, it offers you powerful effects. In this case, it makes it so you can't lose life this turn, you can't lose the game this turn, and your opponents can't win the game this turn. So it's got a Platinum Angel style effect, while also locking your life. You can't lose life in any way, all for 1 turn on top of making one of your creatures protection from each of your opponents, and this card replaces itself when you cast it. Fateful Hour is one of those abilities that people will absolutely forget about. I forget it's on cards. I was playing a game of Chandelure recently. I played something I thought was going to make 2 1/1 creatures, and all of a sudden it made 5 of them. And I went, wait, why? What's going on? And I realized, oh, it's got Fateful Hour. That's when things get really crazy. And it really does have that epic level flavor of you're at 5 or less life, you're in danger. This is where you're either going to win or lose. And the artwork has the feeling of Courageous Resolve, right? You can't even see the gigantic towering beast in its entirety that this guy is raising his blade against. You can just see its claw reaching out. When you see the whole panorama, you get to see it all, which really adds in the impact of what this guy is standing up against. And you can see fallen troops behind him. This is a pretty crazy concept for a card. I love it. It's got that overwhelming disadvantage, and yet we will be heroic. This is a super cool card. Then we've got complete garbage, in my opinion. Fell Beast's Shriek. I read this multiple times and went, all right. 1 red and 1 blue for a sorcery. Each opponent chooses a creature they control. Tap and goad the chosen creatures. So it's like, okay, I play this as a sorcery on my turn. Each one of my opponents, they get to pick one of the guys, and then it just taps them, and the next turn, that creature has to attack and attack somebody who's not you. I mean, admittedly, because I don't go deep into Commander gameplay, the whole part of Goad where they have to attack other players, I forget that most of the time. This just reads to me like you can force your opponent's creature into attacking after tapping it down for your turn. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's really an underwhelming card, but it does get interesting when you get to the second part of it, where it says splice onto instant or sorcery. So 1 red, 1 blue, and 2. As you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may reveal this card from your hand and pay its splice cost. If you do, add this card's effect to that spell. Splice is a very strange ability that first showed up in Magic the Gathering back in the Kamigawa days. And when I first read it, I didn't even understand it. I couldn't figure out what splice meant because it didn't feel obvious to me that it literally adds itself to another spell, but you get to keep the card in your hand. So the only thing that can make this card decent is the fact that you can get reusability out of it. If you cast a complete, let's say you're just casting like a lightning bolt and you're doing 1 red, 3 damage to a target, well, you can pay the extra 1 red, 1 blue, and 2. You get to splice this onto the lightning bolt. So now the lightning bolt does 3 damage, and each opponent chooses a creature they control, tap and goad the chosen creatures, and you get to keep Fell Beast's Shriek in your hand. So it's possible that this card may be better than I think it is, but it seems like absolute chaff to me. Even when I think about the reusability of it, I suppose it's good for sowing a bit of chaos in a game to get people swinging all over the place. But ultimately, I feel like you're going to be better served using other cards. Now, in terms of the flavor behind the card, it's absolutely epic, right? This is literally, in the previous card, we saw somebody standing up against the threat of Mordor, but in this case, you can actually see what happens when that mount shrieks its torment out into the air. You can see this knight who's clutching their head. It's probably reverberating around inside their helm. Look at the look of fear on the people behind him too, right? Somebody in front of them tripping over themselves to get away. And it's not just humans that are affected by this. Look at the horrified look on the horse in the back as well. It's absolutely crazy. Like, from a flavor perspective, this is cool. And the fact that you can keep doing it over and over, I mean, why wouldn't the beast be able to shriek again and again? So from that flavor perspective, it's fantastic. Power level, it's jank. After that, we've got Gandalf of the Secret Fire, and he really is fire. This card is insane, man. Absolutely crazy. 1 white, 1 red, 1 blue, and 1 for a 3/4 legendary wizard. And he's also an avatar. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand during an opponent's turn, exile that card with 3 time counters on it instead of putting it in your graveyard as it resolves. Then if the exiled card doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. And how suspend works is, at the beginning of your upkeep, you remove a time counter from the card, and when the last counter comes off, you get to play it without paying its mana cost. So, I mean, aside from things like counter spells, if you cast a counter spell during your opponent's turn and then it goes off like, oh, look, I get to cast this counter spell during my upkeep 3 turns later. That obviously is not exciting at all, but that's not what you're going to be doing with this, right? You're going to be flinging all kinds of fire and insanity all over the place and then just going, oh, look, because I cast it during your turn, I get to cast it for free again 3 turns from now. This card is absolutely mind-blowing with its power level. And it shows Gandalf the White flinging his power. Here we go, eat it! That's so good. It's so good. I love the sort of calm, powerful presence that he brings to all the tumultuous battle that is going on all around him. This is an amazing card. After that, we've got Aloran's Searing Light. 1 white, 1 red, and 2 for an instant. Each opponent exiles a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls. It's got Spell Mastery. If there are 2 or more instant or sorceries in your graveyard, it deals damage to each opponent equal to the power of the creature they exiled. Now, for me, this is another one that's on the weaker end of the scale, right? Paying 4 mana to just take away 1 creature. Again, I'm looking at this from the perspective of a 2-player game. But if you're playing a 4-player game, then yeah, I guess getting rid of your opponent's biggest creature along with making them take damage if you only need to have 2 instants or sorceries in your graveyard. Like, this is definitely better than the goad spell that we looked at, but it doesn't feel really hyped up on the power scale. Maybe when I see it in action, it will feel a little bit different, right? But take a look at this Dark Drake getting blasted in the neck by Sauron, not Sauron, what am I saying, Sauron, by Gandalf's magic. We just saw Gandalf in the last artwork, and here I am changing everything up. So you can see it's literally the searing light being blasted out by Gandalf, catching it clear in the neck. It's so epic, man. The overall scale of this artwork, the storm clouds in the background, the Dark Rider, it all comes together really, really well. I like the vibe of this. Moving on, we've got Ramus Ekor, the Ancient Shield. This artifact is insane, man. 1 white and 3, so at first you might look in this and think that this is an enchantment, but it is an artifact, a legendary one, and thankfully so, because bro, if this wasn't legendary and you could have multiple copies of it out, it's so nutty. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, draw a card, then create a 0/3 white wall creature token with Defender. Wizards has really leaned into this cast a second spell concept. I don't know exactly where it started. I think it was back in the original Throne of Eldraine days. But we got this idea of every time you do a second spell, you're going to get some kind of benefit. Well, this is huge. You get to draw a card to replace the second spell you've cast every turn. And you get a 0/3 creature token. Sure, it has Defender, but guess what? The next ability says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, creatures you control with Defender gain Exalted until end of turn. So the idea is you're just going to hide behind the Ancient Shield, right? You're just going to throw your walls up, you're going to sit back, and you're only going to send 1 champion out. Because Exalted goes like this. When you attack with 1 creature, it gets +1/+1 for every creature you have with Exalted. So basically this thing is just going to churn out walls, and for every wall you've created, it's going to give your guy a +1/+1 when you attack. Got 3 walls, get +3/+3. The fact that this can just generate endless creatures and keeps feeding you cards, like you're going to think, okay, you know what, casting 2 spells a turn, it's tricky to do because you're only drawing 1 card a turn. But with this, it's going to replace your second spell every time. So with your normal card draw every turn and playing a card off this, the only thing that's going to slow you down is when you draw lands and you don't have 2 spells to go with. This, I think, is an incredibly strong card. We'll see when it's actually in action if it lives up to it. But when I read it the first time, my jaw dropped. It's crazy. The artwork is just okay. You look at it, you're like, okay. I mean, it looks like a castle wall, fine. It fits for the flavor. It's not exciting. It almost feels a little unfinished, if I'm being real, right? But whatever. Some of the other artwork is a lot more epic. Then we've got Sorceress Squall. This one, I don't know 100% whether to rate it epic or meh, because it does have a huge casting cost, right? 3 blue and 6 for a sorcery, but it's got Delve. So you can exile cards from your graveyard to reduce its cost. So you can actually get it all the way down to just costing 3 blue if you have 6 cards in your graveyard you can get rid of. So it makes your opponent mill 9 cards. That's pretty feel-good moment. Then you can cast an instant or sorcery spell from their graveyard without paying its mana cost. If the spell be put into a graveyard, it gets exiled instead. So you can cast one of the spells from the graveyard, but then it gets exiled. This is a very powerful effect overall, right? Milling 9 cards and getting to free play a spell. It doesn't even have to be from the 9 you milled. So if you're playing other mill stuff, you can literally like beef up their graveyard. But the power level on this is going to depend on the power level of your opponent's instants and sorceries and how cheaply you can cast this. For 3 blue mana, it's a steal. For 9 mana, it's a bad deal, right? The artwork on this one is pretty underwhelming. I guess it's to be expected with the panorama. We're only kind of getting like a big black wing, and then you've got some cliffs in the background, a little bit of the castle we just looked at with lightning bursting out of the sky. So this is one of the wank cards that are in this, all right? And then after that, we got to talk about the crazy specialized serialized cards that they're doing. So take a look at this set of 5 different reprints. This is for the upcoming new Lord of the Rings set that we're going to see. And by new, I just mean it's done with the backsheet artwork, and it's done from that old like cartoon version of Lord of the Rings. So Wizards of the Coast is continuing to print the original Lord of the Rings set that we saw before, but for this particular new edition that comes out, it's either November or December, so right at the tail end of the year, they're going to have these special editions. Now, these might look like a secret layer to you, but these are not secret layer cards. These are actually going to be available in regular booster packs. Well, by regular, I mean these are going to be in the collector booster packs. There's a series of 20 of these cards. Here we can see Aragorn, Saruman, you've got Mount Doom, you've got Arwen, and you've got Gandalf. Now, these are done in the old 60 styles like rock band posters, which gives them a very distinct vibe. Part of that vibe is almost illegibility. This doesn't translate well into readable Magic cards, with Aragorn being the obvious exception. When you take a look at him, he's very easy to read, right? And Mount Doom isn't too bad, but Arwen is a nightmare to read. Saruman is wonky because it's all over the place, and Gandalf's googly melting text is also wonky. So, in terms of legibility of these cards, pretty low. In terms of cool factor, these look amazing, right? It's gonna be to taste. Some of these, like, I'm not as excited by the Aragorn and Saruman versions, right? Look at those and I'm like, okay. Mount Doom looks amazing. That eye over the volcano leaking lava down is incredible. The landscape that's around the wording flowing down on lava, what an awesome choice, right? Arwen has like a fairy tale vibe. Honestly, it kind of makes me think of the original Pixie Queen. The yellow and green in the artwork, she looks absolutely beautiful. I love her outfit. The idea of putting her text on her flowing gown, this is cool. This is the kind of stuff they can only do because this set is only going to be available in English, right? And Gandalf looks epic, standing there with power blazing out of his hand on that rock like, come get some, big boy. It's fantastic. So these are going to be done in a serialized edition. There's only going to be 100 copies available of each of these. And I really don't know overall how well this is going to be received. I don't expect that the serialization of these is going to cause a huge flurry, right? Sure, they limited them to 100, so there's not that many of them, but the previous Lord of the Rings had the different rings that you could get as serialized, whereas this will just have like 20 different mythic rares that you can get in a different art style that there's only 100 of. So this feels more like the serialized Phyrexians we got, or like a slight step up from the serialized Brothers War stuff. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't see these cards driving a mega hype wave. This Lord of the Rings stuff isn't going to sell on the same level that the original Lord of the Rings stuff did because that One Ring promotion really did work gangbusters. So just bear in mind again, these are specifically for collector boosters only. It's a full set of 20. I think they look pretty cool overall, but I don't think they're going to make much of an impact. Now, that wraps up everything we have to talk about Magic for right now. I'm going to be doing a live stream over on my Hatcher channel tonight, and I now have a live stream archive channel. So if you want to catch up on live streams that you've missed, that's over on Hatcher Streams, and I'll leave a link to that on the screen here at the end of the video. Big thank you to my patrons for supporting this channel. You guys rule, and your help really does mean a lot to me. Thanks for coming by, everybody. I'll see y'all for the next video.